Hi, everybody. Welcome to lesson 3 on modern existentialism. The name of this lesson is Living Existentially. And this is a very, very cool lesson because it's probably the most practical of all the lessons we have learned so far. We are going to learn how to embody this philosophy of life, modern existentialism, how we put it into practice, what steps should we consider and take in order for us to know, okay, we're actually living it, okay, and not it's not just knowledge, it's actually that we're living it. So I can't wait to start. So let's do it. Soren Kierkegaard again. You might be thinking, and I want to take a few minutes just to tell you why Kierkegaard is so important to our lessons on modern existentialism. Well, first of all, the obvious reason is that this is the man who came up right with this philosophy, and he laid down the foundations for this philosophy of life, right? So the most important fundamental ideas about existentialism are found in Kierkegaard's writings. So, okay, that's the obvious reason. But the other reason that it's equally important, friends, is that Kierkegaard lived his ideas. Okay? His life was a manifestation, an expression of his beliefs. And man, that makes all the difference in the world. It's not enough with just knowing what the right way of living is, but to actually live it. And in this regard, Kierkegaard's life wasn't again an expression of his thought. You might not find in Kierkegaard like an amazing life. Actually, the opposite might be the case. If you become familiar with his biography, you might think that his life was pretty pathetic. And yet, Kierkegaard's life there was nothing accidental about his life. Like he lived the way he wanted to live. Like he was absolutely intentional about everything that he did and say, and almost everything that happened to him. Even the perception people had about him, it was something totally planned out, totally intentional. And it's just quite amazing if you're familiar with his work, and especially with his journals. He anticipated so much about his own life. Like he said, okay, people are not ready. People in my times, in my community, my city, in Copenhagen, right in Denmark, they're not ready to receive this truth that I'm writing about. But I know, he said something like this, right? I know once I'm dead, and years later, people will actually recognize the value of my work. And then I'll be famous. So it's amazing how much this man was in control of not only of his destiny, but even of his legacy, his fame. He knew like he would become an amazing intellectual. But at the time while he was alive, he was pretty much like a nobody, right? He was nobody. I mean, he was an author, but he was not very successful, writing philosophy books and stuff. And he was not regarded very highly in the society he belonged to. So, but he knew, he was aware of all of these things, and he was aware that once again he would become a very influential thinker. So that's amazing about Kierkegaard. Unlike the other major existential thinker, Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche, whose ideas and beliefs are amazing. I mean, they're tremendous value in Nietzsche's work. And boy, I always tell my students, like, if there's a top five, most important influential philosophers of all times, like Nietzsche has to be there. I mean, his work has had an amazing influence in posterior philosophers, and he was just amazing, understanding and analyzing culture and so many other things. I mean, his contribution to philosophy, it's priceless. But Nietzsche never embodied these great ideas. And this is very, very crucial for the purposes of this third lesson on modern existentialism. The importance of actually living your ideas, living who you are, living your values. And it's interesting how Kierkegaard never had a chance to meet or become familiar with Nietzsche's work because, for one reason, Nietzsche began publishing and writing books a few years later, maybe a couple of decades later, after Kierkegaard's demise. And so Kierkegaard didn't have a chance to know anything about Nietzsche. The opposite, it's not, we're not sure. Some biographers have mentioned, have pointed out to instances in which it seems like Nietzsche was familiar with Kierkegaard's work, but we don't know for a fact. However, um, Kierkegaard wrote something in his journals that it just made me think of Nietzsche like the first time I read it. So that's the first quote by Kierkegaard that I want to share with you. He wrote in his journals, "Most people's ideals are the grand, the extraordinary, which they never become." Nietzsche had this ideal of a man, of an individual. He called it the Übermensch or the Superman, the man that, or the individual who in the future will not only be able to reject and do away with the whole Judeo-Christian value system, but he or she will be able to create new values, right? This individual who is an embodiment of strength and power. That was an important concept for Nietzsche. And so this very assertive, powerful individual who will be able to create values for his society, his community. And again, values that are contrary to the Judeo-Christian values that we're so familiar with. And Nietzsche wrote about the Obermensch, particularly in his Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and Zarathustra being something of an embodiment of this Übermensch, or a prophet of the Übermensch. But Nietzsche, in reality, was not that brave. In fact, I read once in one of his biographies that he did not even have the courage to propose in person, to propose to the woman he loved. And he asked a friend to go with him to be like his wingman because he just didn't have the courage, right? And he needed some support. So much for the Übermensch, right? But this is not a criticism on Nietzsche. Again, I acknowledge the value of his work. But for the purposes of these lessons, and particularly this one, it is just so important that you actually live what you believe. Let me show you this next great quote by Kierkegaard. He once said, "A true idea is a lived idea." Now, that is an amazing standard for truth. You can say all you want. You can say you know a whole bunch of things, but if what you know it's not seen, it's not evident in your behavior, in the way you live, then that's meaningless. That's not true. So ultimately, your behavior will determine whether what you believe in it's true or not. That's pretty powerful because it makes the individual the ultimate judge of what is true. Now, that doesn't mean that truth is something subjective. No, that's not really what Kierkegaard meant. I think what he meant, and it's pretty clear what he meant, once again, you have to live what you believe in. Let me show you this next quote. He wrote also from his journals, if a person does not become what he understands, then he does not really understand it. Um, I can paraphrase this and say, within the same spirit, I can say, if you don't become the person you think you are, then you don't really know yourself. You don't, because that's the goal. That is the goal here. That's what living existentially means, right? That your life, your actions are an expression of your thoughts, of the person that you are, that you believe you know you are. So those two things have to align perfectly, perfectly, to the point where you don't have to even explain what your values are, but they are visible in your behavior, in your activities, in your job, and so on. So that was Kierkegaard. Um, his take on truth, right? And this is so important for us again, because Kierkegaard called this commitment, the commitment to live after your own beliefs, your own values. He called that reduplication. That's the concept. He came up with so many interesting concepts. But this one, it's really applicable to our lesson here, to our third lesson, the concept of reduplication. You commit, and this is serious, okay? As serious, probably, to give you like an example or an analogy, I should say, as serious as when you marry someone, right? And you go to a place of worship and you're in front of a priest in the presence of God, right? And you make this vow to love this person till the rest of your days, right? And be with this person in good times and bad times. Well, reduplication, it's a commitment like that. It's that serious, but you're committing to yourself, to your values, to the idea of yourself, right? And okay, we learned in the previous lesson, how do we discover who we are, right? And okay, we dig inside of ourselves, right? We analyze our what's important in our lives, what's valuable, and we can do this on our own, reflecting and using two methods of evaluation, right? Our thinking and our feelings. And when we involve other people, right? We invite other people into this analysis, trying to understand who we are, what's important for us. Now, I mentioned and we talked about values in the previous lesson, because in the end, that's what really spell out who you are, your values. Do you remember that lady from that book, The Myth of Normal, by clinical psychologist Gabor Mate? This lady, Lena Dunham, who said that she was given the task, the assignment of writing down her values, and she could not think of any value that didn't belong to anyone else. Okay, so this is very important in order for us to really know, have a grasp on who we are, like truly. We got to be able to spell out our values, our personal values. Okay, we talked about this in the previous lesson, but it's very important for the context of this lesson. Being able to spell out these values, and values that when you tell people these values that you have, your values, they will be able to say, yes, that's true, that's who you are, that exactly defines you, that set of values. Okay, we need to come up with something like that. I remember talking to a gentleman about values, and he said that his family was the most important thing in his life, like the most valuable thing. And I said, what do you mean by your family? Who? Like your parents, your siblings? Oh, yeah, my parents, my siblings are super. They are the most important thing in my life. And I asked him, I said, how often do you see your family, your parents? And they live in another state. And he said, well, I see them every Thanksgiving and Christmas. Like, I don't miss it. Like every Thanksgiving and Christmas, I get to spend time with my folks. Well, that's twice a year. So something that it's very, very important to you, your family, you see them just twice a year. Okay, maybe you call them regularly. Do you? Do you call your family like regularly, like every week? Okay, please don't get me wrong here. We love our families. I love my family. But if you ask everybody else, they're going to say the exact same thing. Oh yeah, family is the most important thing to me. So that value is going to say very little of you, who you are as an individual. But I also use my example of education. How education it's like key, it's crucial, it's fundamental to who I am, a fundamental value. And I think it's pretty evident here, right? Because of the lectures, these lessons that I'm putting together, these videos, and my profession. And boy, you don't know all the other things that I do outside of my job that has to do with education, with in imparting, sharing knowledge and empowering people with knowledge, with information. That is who I am. And it's manifested in my profession, right? In my activities, like recording these videos again. So you gotta really dig deeper and seriously inside of you to find out what's truly valuable in you. At another time, I remember speaking to a student, a young girl who, well, she was in her mid 20s, and she said that social justice was very important for her. Like this was the most important value that she had, and I said, what do you mean by social justice? And she said that she's really committed to improve the lives of people at the bottom, like poor people. And I say, okay, so by your telling me this, I said, you're telling me, in other words, that this is probably the first thought you have every morning. Okay, you wake up thinking, okay, I'm going to make a difference today, and I'm going to make a difference in this people and in this family. That's kind of like what you're telling me. If this is fundamental to you, you're telling me that you regularly give, a portion of your income to people in need, that you're able to tell me that you regularly volunteer in organizations that in some manner try to improve the lives of people at the bottom, and that you can mention people by names and families that you actively presently help, and maybe you're studying something related, right, to maybe you're starting to be a social worker. Okay, then that will fit, right? All those things, all those activities, behaviors will fit with that idea, with the value of caring about the poor. Now, that was not her life, and I wasn't trying to be mean or judgmental, right? I was simply trying to make her see, and I'm trying here to make you see that many of these things that we consider important, I mean, are they really that important? Like, how much of our time are we investing in these things that we consider to be very important? How much of our resources are we directing, right, or dedicating to this idea or belief or value that you have? And maybe that's a good way of finding what's valuable in your life. Ask yourself, what do you spend most of your time doing or thinking about? That will give you an idea what's really important to you, what's valuable. Because if you are that person who actually every day calls, or most days call, uh, your family, and you just can't wait to get to the end of the day to call your mom and tell her about your day, and your life is I mean, you're living near your parents or your family, and that's very important to you, like being around your family, so you're in contact with them continuously or regularly. Okay, then I can see, well, yes, for that person, family is super, super important. Um, but again, think about how much time do you dedicate, you invest in whatever, or how much of your time do you spend thinking about something or speaking? That's another good way of detecting, right? What's valuable. What do you talk about most of the time? So is it your family really? That's normally what you talk about with people? Like you're known for always talking about your family? You're known for always talking about the poor? So, okay, so that's what it means to know oneself. You have an idea of your personal core values. Now, once you do that, once you know that, once you have that knowledge, the next thing is to reduplicate. You make a commitment to live after those values. In, in good and bad times, you're going to commit to live after that idea of yourself. Okay, you have an idea of who you are, the kind of individual you are, and you're going to commit to that every day. And once again, to the point where you don't even have to tell people what's valuable to you. They will see it immediately. They will know what's important to you. That's who we want to be. Once we make that commitment, once we commit to reduplicate our values into our actions, then we live existentially. That's what living existentially means, right? And once again, I'm not trying to pick on good old Nietzsche, right? But that's not what Nietzsche did. Kierkegaard did. Now, living existentially then means that your actions are an expression of your beliefs, your ideas. Now, this is really important. Let's not confuse, because it's very important to distinguish between being authentic or genuine and living existentially. These are two very different things. Um, when you live existentially, when you live after your beliefs, you live a genuine, authentic life. You do. But there are many, many, many people who are very genuine in their orientation, in their behavior, but they're not living existentially because they don't really know themselves. Okay, genuine people, authentic people are people who they don't put on any facade or wear any mask. I mean, these people are the same people in every context, and we like people like this, right? These are people who are not fakes, and they say what they mean, and if they like you, they're gonna tell you, they're gonna make it known, and if they don't, same thing, right? They have nothing to hide, and they don't hide anything, and that's pretty cool. And I know a lot of people like that. As a matter of fact, in Latin America, I would say most people are like that. Especially, I'm thinking about, because not all Latin American people are the same. We even have subcultures, right, within the larger Latin American culture. Let's say people in the Caribbean, right, in the area of the Caribbean Sea. Let's say people from Venezuela, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba are very similar in that way. Like people are very genuine. If somebody does not like you, they're not gonna hide it. They're gonna be pretty upfront about it. Okay, so you're gonna make no mistake about it. And when they like you, the same thing. And these are people who are very vocal, and it's great. Um, I actually miss sometimes living among people like that, people who are genuine. Because here in the United States, it's a different story, and especially if you live in North Carolina, where people are so nice, so friendly, and so polite that many people, perhaps most people, are. Yeah, they're friendly and polite, but other people, man, they act like really, really politely to you, very friendly, but you know they're full of it. I mean, you can just see through them. And they give you this big smile. Hi, how you been? And I remember talking about this in one of my classes. I once said, "Gosh, I really miss people, somebody calling me an SOB." My students were like, well, what do you mean, Mr. Molina? Do you like being called an SOB? I'm like, no, not that I particularly like being called an SOB, but when somebody does, that it's just genuine. That's genuine feelings, right? When you tell somebody something like that, you're a son of a, okay, you're not acting out. And sometimes I say, I miss that. I actually appreciate that. Right? Even if you don't like me, if you tell me you don't like me, I'm actually gonna like you, right? For saying it. So that's pretty cool. But that's being genuine and authentic. Living existentially, once again, it's different. It's a commitment. And it's a commitment that implies, requires a lot of self-knowledge and a habit of examining yourself and reflecting and engaging with other people in, self-discovery. So that's very important, okay? If you live existentially, you're going to be genuine, you're going to be authentic, and people are going to see it. But that's not the same thing, right? Those two are not the same thing. People can be genuine and not living existentially, because most Latin Americans, they just don't have a clue, right? They go with the flow, like in most places. People don't think deeply about their values, about who they are, what makes them unique as individuals. People don't reflect, don't spend much time thinking about these things, or they don't have the habit, right? Now, one final thing, because I, I gotta be careful here with letting you know this idea of reduplication, right? And being committed to live after your beliefs and your values and your idea of who you are. It's true that we are, most of us are a work in progress, okay? That there is room for development, and development, it's good, feeling that we're evolving. So, but let's not confuse that, you know, being like a dynamic, having a dynamic identity with having a fixed identity. When you commit to live after your beliefs, okay, there's got to be room for flexibility, because I see life, friends, this way. I see our own individual lives as a puzzle. Let's say a 100-piece puzzle. Okay, that's us basically. But when we are young, we have about 20 pieces of the puzzle and 80 pieces missing. Okay, so when we grow up and we have experiences and we learn things and we engage in self-reflection and analysis with other people, and we begin discovering things about ourselves that we were not aware of. So, and those things are like new pieces of the puzzle that you find, you discover, and you like put it in the main frame, right? And every time that you discover something about yourself, you put a new you find a new piece and you put it in the puzzle, and you have a much better idea of who you are. Okay, so it's not like, let's say if you're let's say you're in your mid 20s and you already have a clear idea of who you are, and of your values, and you make the commitment, you reduplicate, and you say, okay, I'm gonna reduplicate, I'm gonna live existentially, and this is who I'm gonna be always. Okay, you gotta stop and think for a moment that there are many things about you that you still don't know, and you're gonna learn about these things eventually. Once again, having experiences, going through difficult times, and even tragedies. I mean, boy, you'll learn so much about yourself. when you're going through tough times. And it's good to incorporate this new knowledge, these pieces of the puzzle, right? Incorporate them in your puzzle, in this puzzle that tells you who you are. So you have a much better idea of who you are, what your values are, and therefore what path to take and to commit to. Okay? But let's never go to the other extreme and say, well, because I've heard many people actually saying these things, right? Like, oh yeah, well, our ourselves are so dynamic and they're so blah that you can be one thing today and a totally different thing tomorrow, and that's okay. We change our mind about who we are, and there's no problem about that. Don't believe that for a second, friends. That just, to me, that speaks of total confusion and total lack of self-knowledge. It's not the case that you one day or for years you're very passionate about painting, let's say painting, and painting is really important to you, and then you totally change your mind about painting and you end up hating painting because you discovered music, that you like music a whole lot more than painting, and then you adopt a different um, identity, let's say. That's not the case. Don't believe that for a second. All these things are, once again, pieces of the puzzle. You liking to paint. Okay, that's part of you. If this is really big, important to you, if you have spent hours or years, dedicated to painting. Okay, this is something that it's part of you. It's maybe not, it's definitely not the whole story. And once again, depending on how young you are, it's definitely not the whole story, but it's part of the story. When I was very young, one thing that I discovered since I was very, very young, I was like 7 years old. I could speak in public like it was nothing. And I see how incredibly stressful, intimidating this can be, even for grown-ups, right? To being in front of just a small group of people and say, address to a group of 5, 6 individuals, people get so stressed about it. I can speak to thousands, millions of people. I've never have, but the first time when I was 7, I actually sang in front of an audience of about, I don't know, 300 people, and it was like nothing. And then just teaching, it was very natural in me. But then what happened? When I became an adolescent, I got really interested in music, and I, wanted to be a musician, right? A singer, songwriter, and but then I realized years later that I was not that good at music, and but I realized later the connection. I saw the connection between music and communicating, speaking to audiences, and that having to do with education, right? I was able, with experiences to add more pieces to the puzzle, right, of my existence, and I could see the connection. Okay, well, singing in a way, it's a way of communicating to people, and speaking in public, okay, and you put those two together, okay, well, that's what educators do. They communicate to large audiences, and here again, I'm doing it again, right, in these videos. So it's not like I became or have adopted like totally different personalities, identities throughout my life. No. Don't have that perception, because it's the wrong perception about yourself. You are born with a unique set of skills. Some of them you're aware of, others you might not be aware of, but they're there, waiting to be discovered. They're waiting for the opportunity to manifest themselves when you engage in the right activity, when you find yourself in the right place at the right time, and then you see, boom, oh, wow, I didn't know I was so good at this, or I didn't know This this was so cool. This was so great that this thing would make me feel so great about myself. Boom, you discover something about yourself, something you're passionate about and you're good at. So that's very important. So we are a work in progress, but we have to be diligent and mindful in, okay, digging, starting with a set of values. Right now, right now, you should be able to know what's really, really important to you. And if you don't, well, you know what to do. Examine yourself, reflect, like these questions that I was asking before. What do you spend most of your time doing or thinking about or speaking about? Okay, that will probably give you a clue. If it's nothing meaningful, nothing you find like really, really great, okay, then try different things, engage in different activities, talk to people. Hey, what do you think I'm good at? Do I stand out for doing anything? Do you see me as, you know, particular in some way? Please let me know, right? Share your perspective with me and help me out, right? Trying to figure out who I am. That's really cool, man. I already get to a point in my life where I have a pretty well grasp on myself, right? I know who I am. I know my values, but I'm open. I'm open to learn new things, discover new things about myself, finding new pieces of the puzzle. But I gotta say though, it's just fantastic. It's exciting when you don't know a whole lot. You know, when your puzzle doesn't look like it's like it's not even half. You don't even have half of the pieces, but you're digging and trying to find those pieces, right? And it's just exciting. So I hope you feel excited about, man, this this idea of modern existentialism, all these ideas that I've been sharing with you. I really hope you find them exciting because I do. And as I said in my introductory video, gosh, I feel like this is the greatest thing in the world, right? This philosophy. But this is a philosophy, friends, that you have to live. You have to embody to make sense, to be meaningful, to be relevant. Because if it's just knowledge, then okay, well, you might know a thing or two about existential philosophy, but you're not an existential thinker. You're not living existentially, and you don't know what you're missing. This is the most beautiful thing, the best way to live, friends. So there's much to say. This is just the first video of this third lesson. So I hope to see you again in the next video. And for now, I'm going to say bye. And as always, reminding you, if you enjoy these videos and these lessons, just like and subscribe. I will really appreciate it. So see you next time.